Live from the 22 News Broadcast Center, your local election headquarters. This is a debate for the 1st Hampden District seat. And now, here's Rich Teddemer.
Good afternoon and welcome to a special Your Local Election Headquarters presentation here on 22 News. I'm Rich Teddemer. Today we're hosting a debate between candidates running in the 1st Hampden District in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. The district includes all the precincts in the towns of Brimfield, Holland, Palmer, Sturbridge, Warren, and Wales, as well as most of the town of Ware. And joining us in the studio today are incumbent State Representative Todd Smola. He's a Republican, and his Democratic challenger, Tanya Neslusen. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Each candidate will have 1 minute to make an opening statement, and by virtue of a coin toss, Representative Smola will go first.
Rich, thank you very much for the opportunity today to Channel 22. Thank you to my opponent for being here to participate in this forum. And thank you to the voters of the 1st Hampden District for giving me the opportunity to serve you over the period of the last 14 years. We've worked very well together to promote issues that are important to Massachusetts, issues on education, on public infrastructure, on the environment, on issues of opiate addiction. And we've done that because we have come together as communities working with the state. And I believe that I've been a good broker with the communities of the 1st Hampden District in order to make sure that you have a voice on Beacon Hill. And that's what's extremely important, I think, in public service, is that you don't forget where you've come from and that you represent the very best of what those communities are all about. I'll look forward to continue to work with you over the course of the next 2 years with the Baker administration, who has been able to promote some great success in Massachusetts. We've got more jobs, low unemployment rate, and an economy that is really cranking. And I believe that we can continue on that good note of prosperity here in Massachusetts.
Tanya Neslusen, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you to everyone for having me here today. Thank you to Representative Smola for agreeing to debate today. My name is Tanya Neslusen. I am the Democratic nominee for State Representative in the 1st Hampden District. I have lived in this district most of my life. I have raised a child here. This district is very important to me. Over the last few years, I have seen storefronts closing in Ware, in Palmer, across the district, where I think we really have an opportunity to bring some of the prosperity that we've seen in Eastern Mass back to Western Mass and Central Mass. I think that we also have an opportunity to promote more equality and better health care across the Commonwealth, and that's what I intend to do should I be elected on November 6th.
We now move to our question and answer part of the debate. I'll ask the question. Each candidate has 1 minute to respond to that question, and the order of questions was also determined by the coin toss. And Tanya, you get the first question. Plans for a $650 million water park resort and spa complex in Palmer were announced early last month. What are your thoughts on this major potential development, and what kind of input should town residents have on that process?
I think that it's a good opportunity for economic development. It's a good opportunity to bring quality jobs into the area. It's also an opportunity to bring people into Palmer and the 1st Hampden District as tourists, because it really is a beautiful area. I think that residents do need to be a part of the planning process in terms of making sure that we aren't implementing something that's going to be uncomfortable for them in terms of noise or space or encroaching on public spaces. However, I do believe that this is ultimately a very good thing for our district.
Todd, what do you think about that project?
I think it's a great idea. I was happy to be at the table 2 years ago when the negotiations for this idea first came to front. I'm actually very proud that we brought Secretary of Economic Development Jay Ash to the town of Palmer to talk about the specific use of this site that's right directly across the street from Exit 8 in the town of Palmer. And I think that the town should have a voice. Ultimately, no development should move forward without the elected representatives or the individuals of the community being able to weigh in on it. A $650 million proposal is huge. It's going to bring a lot of things with it. There's going to be traffic concerns, environmental concerns, permitting concerns, and the community is ultimately the line of first defense to make sure that it's the right fit for the town of Palmer. I think that there's great opportunity there. I think it will bring jobs. I think it will bring money. I think it will bring great things to the economy, not only for Palmer, but for the region. And so I think that we should support this in every way that we can.
You mentioned the Mass Pike, and that's part of our next question here. The distance between the Mass Pike Exit 8 in Palmer and also Exit 9 in Sturbridge is nearly 14 miles, and that's the second longest distance between exits that are on the pike. Would you support the construction of a new exit between these two, and if so, how would the state go about that process?
I'd absolutely support the addition of a new exit. As a matter of fact, I've spoken to officials in the towns of Warren and Brimfield. I also sponsored an amendment this year in the state budget to exploring the opportunity for a new exit. Right now, in Western Massachusetts, there is actually a study that's being conducted for an additional exit, and I believe that the addition of an exit between Palmer and Sturbridge is going to be the next exploration of study. It'll be a bill that's going to be filed in the new term, and I think the local residents are the most important piece to that proposal. They need to weigh in on it, and it's obviously going to have a huge impact on the local economy. It's going to have a huge impact on local traffic and what happens within those towns, and so they have to be ultimately the ones that are in support of it. There has been great advocacy for it so far, and I believe that we should continue and explore the opportunity.
Tanya, your thoughts about a new exit between 8 and 9?
I am strongly in favor of a new exit between 8 and 9. There actually is an access road in Warren about halfway down, and there's a transom right before that, which would actually make it really easy to just widen and expand that without the cost of building brand new and plowing through trees and having to get right-of-ways and all of that. I have been speaking about this with residents of the district for about a year now, and there seems to be a lot of interest and a lot of support for the idea. I'm interested in also not only the lessening of the traffic, but also the opportunity that it'll bring to the region by making easier access to Warren, Brimfield, and Ware.
Let's stay with transportation then, and this is the next question. Some residents of Palmer and surrounding towns are hopeful for the east-west rail link between Springfield and Boston with a stop in Palmer. Do you think that the state should invest in such a rail link? And if so, what would you do as a state lawmaker to make it a reality?
Absolutely. I am absolutely in favor of the east-west rail with a stop in Palmer. I would advocate for the DOT has them on their priority list for this year already. I would advocate and keep pushing for both things. I think that not just the commuter rail portion, but also strengthening the freight capacity is vital for the development of Western Mass as a whole. And we need to make sure that transportation and infrastructure investments are not just looked at in Boston and the surrounding communities, but we need to start moving that prosperity west so that the wall doesn't stop at Worcester. And we've seen what a success the Worcester rail stop has been, and I would like to see that prosperity pulled across through Palmer.
Representative Smolo of the east-west link, we've been talking about that for a long time. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a strong advocate for east-west rail. I was a selectman in the town of Palmer when this issue first came up many years ago, been on record in support of it, and I think the state should step up to the plate and provide support for the initiative. I brought the state rail administrator out to the town of Palmer to talk about the specifics of what is actually being looked at right now in the study. Palmer is going to be on that list to be looked at in the study, and a potential stop in Palmer is going to be part of that exploration as well. Palmer is the town of 7 railroads, and all the major rail junctures used to pass through that community at one time or another. And in its heyday, passenger rail service was a great opportunity for the local residents and for people that lived in the surrounding area. And I think we can get there again. One of the big problems we have in the state of Massachusetts is our transportation infrastructure. And if we can offer other alternatives for people to get to and from work, moving in and out of the cities, moving from Eastern Mass to Western Mass by rail, I think that that's a positive thing. And I think the state can be a real player in that.
Once again, next question comes to you. More than 2,000 people are estimated to have died from opioid overdoses in Massachusetts last year. What do you think of the state's response to the crisis, and what else do you think needs to be done to bring down the number of deaths?
I think we've made great progress in the state of Massachusetts relative to opiates. I think it is a severe problem not only here in Massachusetts but nationwide. As the ranking member of the Committee on Ways and Means, I stood and advocated for additional funding, and I think the most important thing relative to it is the treatment programs. It's not enough that we have a Narcan program that helps to bring people that are in the throes of an addiction. We've got to be able to get them into a treatment program. We have to have the hospital beds there for them, and we have to have the services, wraparound services that are able to bring them together and to be able to meet the needs that they have while they are trying to beat this problem in their lives. We're seeing this touch every single family. It's brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, and it's a problem that Massachusetts really needs to put into the forefront. If you've watched what we've done in the last 4 years in Massachusetts, we've added more money, we've increased the treatment programs, and we're adding more beds. I think we've got to continue down that path. We've made the most significant financial investment for opioid crisis in Massachusetts that we have prior to the Baker administration, and I think we're going to continue down that path because we've got to beat this addiction.
Tanya, what do you think about the state's response to the opioid crisis, and how can we bring down deaths?
I think the state's response has been good to date. I do think that we need more beds. We do need open access to Narcan. And also we need to invest not just in treatment programs, but also in prevention programs. We can't just rest on our laurels and assume that treating addiction is enough. We need to make sure that we are ahead of the ball in preventing addiction in its earlier stages and looking at this as the healthcare crisis that it is. We need to look at prescription medication and how the cost of prescription drugs and the lack of availability to prescription opioids has led to the opioid crisis, as well as certain preventative programs that are available for more recreational users in terms of, keeping kids busy, providing opportunities within the community to keep people off of the streets.
Okay, candidates, we're at the halfway point of our debate right now. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break, and then we'll be back with more questions for the candidates running for the State House 1st Hampden District. You're watching a special edition of your local election headquarters right here on 22 News. Welcome back to our special Your Local Election Headquarters debate between the candidates running in the 1st Hampden House District. We continue with questions for the candidates, and Tanya Neslusin gets the next question. Healthcare costs continue to rise in Massachusetts and across the country. What do you think that the state legislature should do in order to help reduce the burden of paying for healthcare?
I think there are a couple of things. One, I think we need to move towards single payer. Once we have single payer, the benefit is that we will have a larger block with which to negotiate with providers and pharmaceutical companies in terms of the cost of care. The other thing that we need to do is we need to push a focus to preventative care and make sure that we make that easily accessible, because it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot more cost effective, and it makes a lot more sense to get someone in at the beginning of a problem rather than at the end. Medication costs a lot less than a quadruple bypass. Making sure that you have birth control is a lot is a lot cheaper than paying for a pregnancy. And these are the things that we need to do.
Todd, your response to that question.
Preventative care is really at the key of helping to reduce the healthcare costs. And in Massachusetts, we're unique in comparison to other states because we have universal healthcare coverage. More than 97% of the residents in Massachusetts are covered by some sort of a health insurance plan, and that's something that Massachusetts should be proud of. We broke the barrier and became the first state, and no other state in the nation has done that. But it's a costly endeavor, and we pay for that in the state budget. But in terms of a single-payer system, I don't think that's going to work for Massachusetts. It's extremely costly. It's going to be expensive to the people that utilize that form of a system. And in the Commonwealth, what we really need to do is focus on those overall cost containment things that the state of Massachusetts has dealt with on an annual basis, and that includes the high cost of prescription drugs. The state of Massachusetts has to deal with those costs because here in this country, we do all the research and development, and other countries are able to reduce those prices because we do the homework for them. So we've really got to get control of cost containment on what it takes for medical services, and I think that's going to ultimately help the bottom line of healthcare in Massachusetts.
You get the next question, Todd. Do you think that the state's gun laws are, let me go back to that gun control first. It's a highly debated topic around the country, and Massachusetts, of course, has the assault weapons ban, and earlier this year enacted a law prohibiting bump stocks. Do you think that the state's gun laws are too strict, not strict enough, or just about right?
We have some very strict gun laws here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I think they're a little too strict for what the Second Amendment is all about. We shouldn't be going after the lawful gun owners. The lawful gun owners are the ones that utilize the rules accordingly, and at the same time, the law shouldn't be restricting them when we should be going after the people that don't use guns the way that they should be using them. Our sportsmen, our hunters, the people who use them for recreational activities are the ones that follow the rules, and the ones that don't are the ones that we seem to punish everyone on. But on the bump stock legislation, I'm proud to say that I negotiated the language in conference committee to be one of the first states to pass a ban on bump stocks in Massachusetts. And I think what we need to do is focus on the people that shouldn't be the possessors of guns, that they shouldn't be the ones that having the guns and utilizing them for the wrong reasons, and not go after the lawful Second Amendment legal gun owners. That's, I think, where Massachusetts goes astray. We seem to put everybody into the same pot, and I don't think that's reasonable from the perspective of writing law in Massachusetts.
Tanya, your thoughts on gun control? Too strict, not strict enough, or just about right?
I think we're just about right. In Massachusetts, we actually do have one of the stricter regulations around gun control. You know, in speaking with people, I mean, growing up in this area, you can't get away from guns. I mean, people use them to hunt, they use them for self-defense. You know, just about everyone owns or has used a firearm. That said, the regulations that are in place, for instance, the ERPO bill that passed this year and the bump stock ban, those are reasonable restrictions to keep guns in the hands of lawful gun owners. I'm not in favor of taking guns away from anyone who is going to be using their firearm lawfully. However, I think that, you know, we need to use common sense.
There are 3 questions on the state ballot this year, including question 3, which is a vote on whether or not to uphold the state's transgender rights laws. What are your thoughts on this state law, and how will you be voting on question 3?
I will absolutely be voting yes on question 3. One of the reasons that I decided to run was because my opponent actually opposed this legislation when it was first proposed in 2016. And I feel that it's absolutely vital that we stand up for all residents of Massachusetts, including our transgender residents. And to do anything else would be discriminatory and dangerous to those people. I absolutely think it's appalling that this is even coming up as a ballot question. There is no danger from transgender individuals. There is danger to transgender individuals should this legislation be overturned.
Todd, your thoughts on the transgender rights law, and how will you be voting on question 3?
I vote yes on question 3. I think there's a reason to preserve the law now. And the reason that I voted in opposition to it 2 years ago was because we had no information on it in Massachusetts. We weren't trying to stop public accommodations. What we were trying to do is address the concerns that were brought forward by public safety officials, as well as many parents and people across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that had major concerns about the wrong people taking advantage of this law in the wrong way. Now that we have 2 years of data, we've seen that this has not impacted the Commonwealth in a negative way, that there haven't been these incidents that were the issue of concern 2 years ago. And so I think there's good reasons to keep the law in place in Massachusetts, and I think there are good reasons to defend it. And I'm going to be yes on question 3.
One of the more controversial proposals to come before the legislature in recent years is the so-called Safe Communities Act, which failed to pass the House's past session. The proposal would limit cooperation between local police and federal immigration officials. Would you support such a law if it came up for a vote in the House?
I absolutely oppose the Sanctuary Cities proposal in Massachusetts. I was on the 6-person conference committee that stopped this proposal from coming forward as part of the budget. It was approved in the Senate, and fortunately we were able to stop it in conference committee, and I was proud to stand up in opposition to it. Here's the issue that we have. We're not trying to go after dreamers or folks that want to become citizens of the United States of America in the legal way. But we are concerned about those individuals that are breaking the law, that are here for reasons that are not good and are not productive members of society. The Massachusetts court has ruled very clearly that local law enforcement doesn't have a role in cooperating with federal agencies if they want to be held on an ICE detainer. That's because the law in Massachusetts isn't codified in that way right now. Local law enforcement has always worked well with federal agencies, and there is no reason why we shouldn't continue to do that. Governor Baker has proposed a bill that I support that allows local municipalities to work on that standard. I think we should do that here in Massachusetts to protect our cities and towns from those people that are felons and that are the dregs of society.
Tanya, your thoughts on the Safe Communities Act, and would you actually pass that law if it came up for a vote in the House again?
I absolutely would, and before we go any further, I do want to clarify, I do not think that immigrants, whether documented or undocumented, are criminals or the dregs of society. On the contrary, actually, if you look at statistics, they are less likely to be criminal offenders than native-born Americans. That said, the reason that I support the Safe Communities Act is because it just makes sense. There is no reason that a local law enforcement official should be working to uphold federal law. Local law enforcement officials are trained and they are provided the resources to uphold local and state laws. They are not trained and provided resources from the federal government to enforce federal laws. I am absolutely in favor of our immigrants, and I am absolutely in favor of the Safe Communities Act.
Many companies in Western Massachusetts are hiring, especially in advanced manufacturing, but they're having trouble finding workers because not enough local residents have the skills that they're looking for. What should be done to help close this skills gap?
Obviously, I'm in favor of any kind of job training that we can put into place. I think that it would make sense to give those local manufacturers grants for training unskilled workers, because ultimately, if you have a local workforce, they are going to stay with the companies and bring those skills to the local companies for a long time, and it's a win-win for everyone.
Todd, how do we close that skills gap?
Skills gap is a big issue. I recently was in the town of Weir that had a manufacturing forum. It brought businesses from the first Hampden District together. I had the opportunity in the last 2 weeks to tour many of those businesses and talk with them on the front lines about what their challenge is. We've got to give these local manufacturers the opportunity to be able to train a workforce. We have to give them financial incentive so that they can bring individuals in and they can teach them that trade. Many times in our manufacturing businesses, especially small mom and pop operations, they have a very specialized skill, and it's not the kind of thing that any old school can go out there and train them to walk into and then be prepared to work on day one. So we've got to go directly to the manufacturers and let them set the standards relative to the assistance that they need to keep those businesses going. It's not a one-stop shop and one size fits all, but it is giving them the resources and the ability to be able to put those things together that matter to their business and then keep that manufacturing small-based business operation within our territory of Western Massachusetts vibrant and moving forward in a positive direction.
Okay, candidates, we have time for one more question, but your responses have to be 30 seconds, so 30 seconds long. The first Hampden District includes the town of Warren, which was the hometown of murdered teenager Molly Bish. Her family has been advocating for Molly's bill, which would place symbols on Massachusetts license plates. What is the status of this proposal, and what are your thoughts on whether the bill can or should become law?
I'm a co-sponsor of this bill. I'm a close friend of the Bish family, and I've worked with them for over 15 years. I know the family is passionate about this issue, and I believe that it is smart for Massachusetts. The reason they stand behind this initiative is because putting those symbols on license plates will more clearly identify individuals when they are suspected of maybe committing a crime. And I think that's one of the problems that the Bish family has, is that a license plate was looked at, but they weren't able to remember those numbers. And so I think that's something that they carry with them. And I think this is a good proposal and something that should pass in Massachusetts. And we're going to continue to file it.
Tanya, your thoughts on Molly's bill?
I think I agree with Representative Smola. I don't think that it's something that costs a lot, but it can make a big difference. And it's kind of a low-hanging fruit in that way. It's very important, not just for the Bish family, but also for all parents of all children who want to prevent this kind of tragedy from occurring again.
It's time now for closing statements, and each candidate will have 1 minute to make their closing statement. And by virtue of the coin toss, Tanya Neslusen, you go first.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm running for state representative for the reasons that we differ. As you can see today, Representative Smola and I agree on many issues. The issues that we disagree on, however, Safe Communities Act, LGBT protections, criminal justice issues, which we really didn't hit on too much, and healthcare and single-payer healthcare, I think are vital to our communities. I do intend to improve the economic stability and infrastructure of our towns. That is ultimately what is best for our communities, but I also want to make sure that we are looking out for our seniors, for our children, and for the disadvantaged communities within our hometowns. Thank you.
And I know you've been struggling with an upper respiratory thing there, so you made it through. Congratulations. Representative Smola, now your closing statement, please.
Rich, thank you so much. And Tanya, thank you for participating here today. And I think we've identified that there are some things that we agree on, but we also have vast differences. I think being a good, effective legislator in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is also being a part of your communities, the communities that you represent. And I'm proud to say that I've got a 25-year record of volunteerism in the district, serving on boards, committees, and commissions, working in our churches and in our schools, working with our veterans organizations, our food shares, our senior citizen programs, our human service programs, also volunteering with our domestic violence organizations. I have a long record of volunteerism, and I think the most important thing when you go to serve in Boston is that you don't forget your roots and where you came from. Acting as a voice for the individuals that send you to the legislature is the most important thing, and I've enjoyed working with you to do that, and I want to continue to do that for another 2 years.
That's all the time we have for today's debate among the candidates for the 1st Hampden House District. We'd like to thank Representative Todd Smola and Tanya Neslusen for participating today. If you missed any of the debate, it'll be available in its entirety on our website at wwlp.com. And be sure to join us tomorrow at 12:30 for a debate among the candidates running in the 2nd Hampden House District. Remember that Election Day is November 6th, but early voting is going on right now. I'm Rich Teddemer. Have a good afternoon.